Yes.
Yes, I mean,
You can see.
Yes, we can.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. So happy to be here with the group as well as everybody online. I guess I was thinking back as Barbara was explaining about internships and days of yore, and I sort of thought about my first self-initiated internship was in 1985. I was studying soil science in North Dakota, and I decided I really wanted to see what food and fiber production were like in a different part of the world. So I quit college. I don't recommend this, but I quit college in my junior year so that I could go on an internship, and that turned out to be 2 years with the Peace Corps. And I joined the Peace Corps and went to Guatemala as a soil science or soil conservation agent, working with their equivalent of our soil conservation services here in the U.S. I didn't know any Spanish, and that didn't stop me. I knew a lot about soils and crops, having growing up on a farm. And so I wanted to learn from others and share what little I did know. One of the things after that, I stayed for 2.5 years, but over the years, whether I was working with students at Oregon State University or Iowa State or West Virginia or Mississippi State, before I finally came to Texas A&M, I've worked with many students who have finished their school and then want to go into the Peace Corps. And I said, the biggest thing now is we have the convenience of electronic communications and electronic archive purposes. And one of the ideas that I learned of when I was in Guatemala, it was a lot more expensive, but you would set up a camera and take a picture of yourself on the same day of every month, approximately the same time of day. And then at the end of 2 years, of course, you had to get them developed, but at the end of 2 years, you could do a little flip book to see how much you had changed physically. Now, of course, you can do that electronically. You can take multiple pictures of yourself every day. But I think the bigger thing that we learned for the few of us that did that was we were able to reflect upon not just that physical change, but the sort of mental changes that we had as well, the emotional changes as we met new people and said goodbye to some friends who returned to the U.S., et cetera. And so that's kind of the start of the genesis of this session here on reflective practice. And it's not really something that I guess you can necessarily quantify in terms of a specific list of something that we want to do, but I guess this conscientious process about thinking about who you're becoming as you're becoming it, and thinking about, wow, I used to know a particular process in the lab. Now in the real world, I see how it's changed because the materials are different, where I've learned how to adapt and I've learned how to anticipate this particular problem that has arisen. And so that's what I'd like to discuss a little bit with you here this afternoon. So yeah, reflective practice is, I think, in the easiest sense, this sort of purposeful time that you set aside, whether it's every day or I would hope at least every week, but certainly every month, about the sort of changes that are going on for you as you become a professional, as you become a scientist, as you become a more confident communicator with others who are outside of your field of study. And just a note too, I will share all of these slides with everybody online and with everybody here in person. So if you just want to maybe jot a few notes, you can. Don't think that you have to write all of this stuff down. But anyway, that sort of flip book that we created, and actually after about 6 months, you could already see some physical changes that you were going through. It made us think about the changes we are going through even more because we are anticipating what would month 10 look like? What would month 15 look like? How, and for me, it was living in 3 different locations. So the setting behind me changed. And that also invoked memories of those changes and what led up to the changes and what happened after them and how well I could adapt to those new settings. So examining, refining some of the things that we do that will help shape us as we become professionals, thinking about things as we do them, and that really sets you apart. That's higher order thinking because it's removes you from the knee-jerk reactionary thinking if you process things more deeply. So reflective practice, we monitor our actions or our behaviors. We're more conscientiously observing those, and we can start to recognize good versus not so good practices or behaviors. And then, like I said, it gets away from that knee-jerk reaction, maybe helps us plan a little bit better. And certainly some decisions, some examples take pretty deep planning, no doubt, especially speaking of knees and getting down on one's knee, that would call for some introspection, I would think. But let's think about it. And yes, Caleb already stole some of my thunder, as did Alexandra, when they used some key words that I use also in that reflection on your actions. He said, well, there's 3 different things we want to think about as we're becoming communicators. And all of this is predicated on research that has been conducted in terms of becoming more proficient at science communications, more proficient with non-science audiences. And just to back up a sec, for many who work in science, there's been maybe an assumption or a normative value about the knowledge deficit model. I know we talked about that in our course a little bit, but just refreshing a bit, could somebody describe for me what is the knowledge deficit model? Any volunteers? Hazard a guess. I'm a scientist who's doing groundbreaking work in
microfluidic environments.
Beautiful microfluid environments, and the public, if they only knew what I was talking about, if they only understood a little bit, they would love it as much as I do. Hence the knowledge deficit model. I'm doing groundbreaking work in marine biology. And if someone could only, if others only understood or even knew what I was aware of what I was talking about, they would have supported that much more. So it's that attitude or the norm that everybody else has a deficit of my knowledge or my passion for my science, ergo, they're all contrary to what I do, or maybe they're outright oppositional to what I do. Not really the case, as much of our research has come to bear in science communications, and that is that everybody has their own normative value of the value of scientific information. Now, some in more recent times have used science and research to politicize the occasion of whatever is being researched, especially as it relates to climate science and change in our environment. So there's, I think, some differing views on the value of science information, and of course that leads to then people favoring or opposing, which leads to policy formation that favors or opposes the same thing. Hence, all the more important for you to and for all of us to think about how we can share, inform, and educate others about our science. And part of that starts with our reflection and action. So our thinking on our feet. In a moment, we'll take a break. You step out into the hallway to get a sip of water, and the dean of the college happens by and says, "I don't recall seeing you here before. Tell me what it is that you study and why is that so important to society?" And your 15-second elevator's pitch is what? I, I see some smiles, but I was there once too. So a long time ago, I decided I'm never going to get caught off guard like that again. It only took me one time to be actually stuck in an elevator with a high-ranking official who looked over and said, "What do you do?" I said, "Go up and down the elevator." No, well, I learned how to verbalize what I did, not in the scientific sense. There was a movie several years ago about space exploration, and they told the protagonist, "Remember, just plain street language, no math." And the scientist said, "But it's all math." And they said, "Yes, of course, but nobody understands that except you. You have to make it understandable for everybody else." So thinking on your feet, thinking about, what is it that you do that you have normalized in your brain, but to make that understandable for others. And then, perhaps we even think about how would we be prepared for that next situation when we're called into question. But that's a little different than the reflection on action, which is we derive this new understanding by constantly critically examining our own paradigms. The summer internship, that really kind of came more out of business, more so than it did science. Science was a little later to catch on, but now we have fully instituted across the STEM areas. But, what constitutes an ideal summer research internship experience? What are your thoughts on that? What do you hope to gain from your ideal experience?
I know it's been touched on a couple times, but definitely real world experience, like understanding what a job could potentially look like in this field.
So not necessarily doing the science, but getting a sense of what is it like to be a professional person in this role. Okay.
I'd say a big thing for me is growing like my professional network, especially because I'm going international. I'm really excited to meet people from other countries and different cultures and see how they think and how they approach science.
Okay, very good. Alejandro?
I also want to see it like as a test trial what I want to do in the future. Because like for me it's gonna be 3 months there. And like I want to do that possibly as a future job for many years. And doing it now as an internship lets me know how it's gonna be and how will it be like in the future.
Okay. Any others? Yes.
I want to meet other like-minded people or other people who are studying the same thing as me. So it's going to be a lab and it's going to be other people who are doing or working on the same thing. I want to see how they approach things so I can learn from them too.
Okay, very good. Great. Caleb?
I want to be able to like create my own procedures and do research in those, like on something that I really want to do.
Okay, excellent. So I sensed a directional. Alejandro said, "I want to check this out to see if it's something I want to continue doing farther on." And that's excellent. And I heard Caleb say, "I want to check this out and maybe discover some new paths that I can keep doing for much longer." So you're at a great juxtaposition right now because you're kind of still deciding, do I want this as a profession? Or others are thinking, do I want to continue on in graduate school? do I want to make that connections that affords me an assistantship elsewhere, domestically or abroad, with some other scientist that I might meet? That's fantastic, because you think about it, where you really take some time to start thinking about, well, I'm expecting this to happen. I'm expecting to meet that connection that leads to maybe another internship in France for a full year, or that leads to a graduate position at another university, or a 6-month, internship in an international research station. And that's the sort of planning you should go into. I like the answer, but I want to check out if this is something I want to do, because in another life, I used to prepare college students to become teachers. And typically, we didn't do the teacher block until the senior year. And many times, our student teacher would come back and say, what have I gotten myself into? I can't stand freshmen in high school. I've forgotten how much I hated to be a freshman. I can't do this the rest of my life. And they bail out. And so they've invested 3.5 years of college preparing for something that, I had idealized in my mind. And then I got to the real world part of it.
Yes, I found the same thing, like working in labs for several summers. I found I'd rather write about it than do it.
There you go. So great chance to, and that's still a good point of departure to say, I didn't totally prepare and get my degree for something I'm going to hate. I still have time to switch. So yeah, planning ahead, reflection on the action, and then reflection for the action. This is where what we call the transformational learning happens. So in a nutshell, transformational learning is hitting that sort of aha moment and realizing I can no longer ever think about that concept or that thing the same way ever again. I'm transformed. My actions are going to be different. My behaviors will be different. My awareness level will be different because of that single event. And so Jack Mesereau was, one of the founding fathers for transformational learning, but thinking on that content, the process, and the premise of our experiences that we can use to enhance or to better understand our own experiences. And then that, in essence, also changes our worldviews. So for me, that transformational learning happened when I got to Guatemala and started learning how to grow crops on very steep slopes, because North Dakota was and still is, a very flat place. And all of a sudden, the type of erosion that I had studied in North Dakota, wind erosion, was not a problem in Guatemala. It was water erosion, loss of topsoil very quickly. And so it was learning new strategies to protect the soil, to hold it together, different plants that would do that job, beneficial, one serving the other, that made it much more interesting for me. And then also knowing that the vast 100% of all the work we did in the mid-'80s was hand labor. So I was removed from an agricultural situation in North Dakota where it was mechanized agriculture. Everything was done with tractors, with power equipment, to now a place where everything was done with a pickaxe, a hoe, a wheelbarrow, etc., a machete. And so it was a different mindset about how we could grow food and fiber. So if you take those situations, reflection in action, reflection on action, and reflection for action, we find out there's 3 learning types that's been brought about in the literature. So this single loop learning, we become aware of the problem or the challenge in the immediate present. And we look for ways that we can think on our feet and we can change our method or our action or our behavior or our communication message so that we can increase understanding between the parties. But this is no single loop means just within yourself. Okay. So the double loop is I have my awareness plus a feedback loop. Did you understand when we were talking about that earlier? So you're asking customers, what is your understanding of how do you interpret it? And that helps us to reconsider these previous assumptions and where we can still make changes to our practices or our norms or our policies. Now, triple loop then is awareness plus the feedback plus the reopening, as it's called. I like to call it reimagining our existing frames of reference, our existing worldviews that can help us develop a new rationale or a new context to adopt this transformed way of thinking and learning amongst our organizations. So to give it sort of a visual appeal here, very quickly, we've got the single loop learning, we're asking what, double loop, we're asking what and how, and then the triple loop is really why and who. Another way of looking at it that's in the literature is single loop, it says, are we doing things right? So that's just the mechanics. Are we doing things right? The double loop then expands it and says, are we doing the right things for the betterment of others? Then triple loop is what's right? So kind of getting past the immediate situations. Another visual look at it is to see that we can take the results and we can loop that back into our actions, our norms or our practices, or into organizational mindset. That's where the transformation comes in. And of course, we already touched on some of these. Reflective practice helps us, more clearly identify our own values and belief systems, and maybe helps us challenge some of those as we interact with others outside of our inquiry, our field of inquiry. And the ways we can do that, as we've mentioned, are reflective journals, diaries. That's what we'll be asking you to do over the summer, is to participate in a reflective practice process, which is sort of this journaling aspect. And you've had a bit of a taste of that in the class already. But you can also do that by mentoring others, serving as a peer mentor. Oftentimes it helps to think about your own process as you're teaching somebody else. So lots of different ways that we can incorporate reflective practice into our work. And again, this is one of those things that it's not some sort of checklist sort of thing. It's sort of that innate desire of professionalism to increase your own abilities in becoming a professional. So in terms of our learning theory, we say it aligns best with constructivism. We are constructing meaning out of our experiences, and those are ever evolving as we continue creating those experiences. And then, I had this group exercise, but actually we're going to wrap on this because you will get all of these materials sent out. But one thing, let me see if I can bring this up quickly. I'll bet I have to stop share. Then share again. Seeing this.
No.
No, the reflective practice guide. You're not seeing that?
No.
All right, so try to get this share.
There you go.
There. Are you seeing it
Oh,
online?
no.
All right, we'll get faster technology. No. So one of the things that we can do is, it might be seem kind of daunting. How do I create sort of this habit of reflective practice? And as I said, this is something that we're going to share with everybody, as well as the prompts that we'll use. But there's just different ways to sort of prime your own thinking, and then as well as refocusing on the different forms of reflective practice: in action, on action, and for action, and then across the different sort of areas that you would focus on. Do you have any questions? Suggestions? No? Okay, great. Let's break 5 minutes, and then we will gear it up for our next session.
I'm Holly. Nice to meet you.